Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in our Talks with Walt, as we are calling our studies through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. I hope that you've been enjoying annotating your copy of the deathbed edition of Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We're now in the Calamus section, and we're going to look at a little poem called When I Peruse the Conquered Fame. Now, it is a fascinating thing to think about this very idea of the when I blank construction in poetry. Now, you'll of course remember that we've already heard this when I read the book beginning my studies, when I heard at the close of day, when I heard the learned astronomer, of course. We're going to get to that one. We're gonna see this game getting played a lot. Now, where did this idea come from? Well, I'm going to make the argument that Whitman is the great inheritor of first Shakespeare, and then, of course, Milton and Keats. And when we look at their poems, especially some of the sonnet writing that they've done, it's kind of significant that you play this game of when I blank, right? Of course, we think of Keats, when I have fears that I may cease to be. We'll get to it in a bit. Now, my assumption is that you've been with us at LearnStrong.net, down the left-hand side, Talks with Walt, and you've been following our stuff all the way from the very beginning in the inscription stuff up to and including the prairie grass dividing poem that we just looked at. Now, Norton's will give us some background information here that we want to pay attention to. He considered actually the title When I Peruse the Fame of Heroes in his 1860 revisions of this Calamus number 28 poem, but he gave it the present title in 1867 with minor alterations in 1871. Let's just enjoy the poem and pay attention to the way that he likes this word, peruse, right? And scented herbage obviously comes to mind, right, at line 2. When I peruse the conquered fame of heroes and the victories of mighty generals, I do not envy the generals, nor the president in his presidency, nor the rich in his great house. When I hear of the brotherhood of lovers, how it was with them, how together through life, through dangers, odium, unchanging, long and long, through youth and through middle and old age, how unfaltering, how affectionate and faithful they were, then I am pensive. I hastily walk away, filled with the bitterest envy. Now, it's an interesting poem because it's going to juxtapose what fame actually constitutes, which is why he considered that as its title, right? There it is, of course, in the opening line, in the title itself. That is to say, the word peruse here, to muse on, right? He loves, as we've said, he loves this word. The conquered fame of heroes and the victories of mighty generals. Now, of course, readers of this poem by 1892 had to think about Ulysses S. Grant and Lee and all of the great generals of the American Civil War. He says, when I think about all of those guys, I do not envy, and we're going to get to the word envy as the last word of this poem in a little bit. I don't envy them. In other words, they are not my role models. They are not the ones that I aspire to. He says, including the president in his presidency. Remember, from 1860 to 1881, you have Lincoln, Garfield, Johnson, Grant, and Hayes, all as presidents. He says, I don't envy any of them. Now, of course, we mentioned the presidency in the previous poem as well, right? He says, nor I don't envy the rich in his great house, which is a bit ironic because, as we've said in our discussions of Whitman already, he did live the life of poverty for most of his life. I mean, he was not a man of by any extent, means. And he says, but I don't envy people that have money. He says, but, and here's the turning point in this would-be sonnet, right? But when I hear of the brotherhood of lovers, he'll call it comrades, of course, in Calamus. This is this adhesiveness thing that we've been talking about so much. This brotherhood of lovers, comrades, how it was with them. And then notice the repetition of the word how, together, that's a key word for the Calamus section, through life, notice the repetition of through dangers, odium, unchanging, that's that constancy thing that Whitman's always on about. Long and long, we're familiar with that little phrase of long and long, right? Through youth and through middle and old age, how unfaltering. And again, this is the goal for Whitman. He wants to be able to live with a relationship that's unfaltering, that is sustaining, right? How affectionate, that's a very Calamus-like word, and faithful they were. Notice his trinities of the three, right? He says, when that happens, then I am pensive. Now this will be an echo from starting from Pomenac number 9, passage number 9, right? What do you seek? So pensive, silent, right? Then I am pensive, and notice the use of the dash as well to remind us of Emily Dickinson. I hastily walk away. Now, of course, we got a lot of walking in Leaves of Grass. Usually it's walking towards. Here it's walking away. Filled, notice the elided verb, with the bitterest, right, envy. And think about this question. When did Walt Whitman ever actually feel the ability to have that level of friendship? We're told here, I really envy people that have that kind of a relationship. Well, this takes us now to 2a, and the message that's here, obviously the greatest longing by the artist is the longing to be loved and to love. And for Whitman, it's clear this was something that was central to the project of Leaves of Grass. At 2b, I just want to reference the allusions because I'm going to take it to level 3a here in a second. Think about it. Shakespeare in passage 29, sonnet 29, when in disgrace with fortune, and passage sonnet 15, when I consider everything that grows, sonnet 12, when I do count the clock, sonnet 43, when most I wink, and we think about that repetition of that notion that if you're going to write a poem, you can begin with this when I. And of course, we're familiar with this as well. I mean, think about the ways in which we've heard this as well in our other studies, right? Milton's When I Consider How My Life is Spent, and then I mentioned Keats's, When I Have Fears That I May Cease to Be. This kind of construction, I think Whitman's playing with, and as I said to you guys before, I think he's very much enjoying the fact that as you read a poem like this, you're thinking, this is his connection to Shakespeare, Milton, and Keats, 3 of the great poets of all time, right? Finally, at 3b, a way to own a poem like this, what is it that you most envy? And who is it that you most envy? Do you envy fame and fortune? You'll remember that, of course, for Keats, when I have fears that I may cease to be, then on the shore of that wide world I stand alone and think, till love and fame to nothingness do sink. Whitman is going to be about one of the two, love and not fame, or so he's going to say here. And to what degree are you ever made pensive? That is to say, a little bit maybe even melancholy about the fact that there's something that you cannot aspire to. What is that? What is that for you? I think Whitman is challenging us here in the Calamus section on so many levels. I hope you're enjoying that challenge. Thank you.